Super. So I'll kick off then. So first of all, thanks again for letting me talk today. It's been great to hear the different talks, and I think this Nexus Spring Conference is yeah, really exciting, really interesting topics being discussed, and it's been great listening to the other speeches. What I'll do in this session in terms of the agenda is give a quick introduction to nature-based asset markets. An overview of BEF, what we're building, the progress we're making, and kind of what we're looking to do later in the year. And then I wanted to touch on kind of how we've implemented Nexus Tech, just to give clarity to everyone, but also why we chose Nexus and some of the benefits we're already experiencing as a result of it. So my name is Mike Davies, for those who don't know. So I'm a co-founder of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Futures, also known as BEF, and we're a UK social enterprise building solutions to help tackle climate change and biodiversity loss. But before I jump into kind of about us, I'll give you a quick background as to nature-based asset markets and why they're needed. So we as a species are facing two existential threats. The first being climate change, in that we're already starting to experience this right now. Severe droughts, more extreme hurricanes and storms, flooding, kind of the list goes on. And it's only in the last couple of years that we've really started experiencing kind of the big consequences of this. And it's only going to get worse in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years going on. So we've only just really started to experience the effects of these. And I won't explain or run through what climate change is, because there's tons of material out there which will explain it far better than I will. But to pretty much summarize the state we're in, we have been in an era called the Anthropocene era, which is around the last 10,000 years. And what that helps us do as a species is flourish, because we've had a relatively stable climate, which has meant that weather patterns and rainfall and so forth have been fairly predictable across that period, meaning that we can grow crop and really grow as a species. However, we're now coming into a time where that's starting to change. The climate's changing. It's getting harder now to have that predictability. And as I said, we're already starting to see some extreme consequences of this. But we're also seeing kind of other aspects of that lack of predictability. Now, the primary cause of that is anthropogenic emissions, so emissions from human activity, such as fossil fuels and deforestation. We'll always have carbon coming into the atmosphere from volcanic activity and kind of the natural flow through photosynthesis and so forth. However, what we've been doing for the last 150 years, because of the Industrial Revolution, is digging deep into the ground and touching and tapping up kind of carbon that's been locked away for millions of years, burning it and then releasing that carbon up into the atmosphere. And as a result, I'm sure we're all aware, that's then trapping more heat into our atmosphere, which is ultimately changing our climate. It's melting the polar ice caps, which is then having an impact on our ocean currents, which is going to have an influence on our climate as well. So that's one of the big issues we're facing. To make things worse, we've got another challenge, which is biodiversity loss. Right now, we've got a massive disconnect between what we do as a species and capitalism and the natural world, in that we'll cut down forests, we'll exploit nature without really considering the cost of doing so when evaluating the cost of a product. And as a result, we're now seeing mass extinctions. What we're seeing right now is the current extinction rate being hundreds, if not thousands of times greater than the natural rate. And scientists are now starting to say that we are entering into the 6th mass extinction of our planet. Now, why is this important? The main one being that we as a species rely on other species to survive. It was mentioned on the previous call by Tash around bees. Now, bees are absolutely essential for us for pollinating our crops, for how to produce massive crop yields. And we're already seeing, in the UK at least, a 50% decline in bees and wild bee populations. And these bees provide a massive service to us. Pollination provided purely from bees is valued at around $50 billion a year. So not only is this bad from an ecology perspective, but from an economic standpoint, this is really bad as well. Now, both of these threats have to be addressed at rapid pace. We've basically been told that we need to make some really drastic changes by 2030 for us to have a chance of not eliminating these issues, but significantly reducing the potential effects they could cause on us and somewhat managing it. And there's a broad things we need to do, including transitioning towards renewable energy. But the other thing we need to do is start valuing nature and including it in economic models so that we are making better policy decisions and we are more aware of the impact that we're causing through our consumption. Now, there's already markets which exist which have been proven and can address both these challenges, which are nature-based asset markets. Now, there's a few out on the market. And when I'm talking about nature-based assets, I'm talking about an asset which is tied directly to a natural service or a natural asset, which could be biodiversity, it could be carbon, it could be pollination, for example. And there's a few markets out there, the largest being carbon credits, of which that then breaks off into two different markets. You have voluntary carbon credits and the voluntary carbon market, and the compliance carbon market. Now, the compliance carbon market is the big market. It's where certain industries have to participate. It's a cap and trade market, and that's the likes of aviation and oil and gas, where they're mandated to participate in this market. And how it works is they're basically set a number of amount of carbon they can emit into the atmosphere and are allocated credits, which if they are successful in reducing their emissions, they can sell excess credits they have and get a profit. So that's the incentive mechanism behind that. Now, the voluntary carbon market is completely different. It's a lot smaller, but it's where a lot of the innovation is occurring. And this is basically, as you can guess from the name, you participate in this market on a voluntary basis. So most of the organizations you'll see right now who are claiming kind of climate or net neutrality are purchasing carbon offsets from this market, so the voluntary carbon market. And it's smaller than the compliance market, but we're seeing massive growth in this right now, as we're seeing all these organizations pushing towards becoming net zero. And it's expected to increase 15-fold in the next 10 years. So that's the carbon markets, and that's focusing just on carbon, whereby one carbon credit equals 1 ton of CO2 removed or sequestered from the atmosphere through projects such as afforestation, reforestation, so planting or restoring rainforests and trees, which basically suck out carbon from the atmosphere. Or it could be from initiatives such as using more energy efficient cooking stoves and the benefits of the reduced carbon emitted into the atmosphere because of implementing this approach. Now, there are other asset markets on top of this worth mentioning. So one being payment for ecosystem services. And think of this as being you will compensate a farmer for helping to restore and preserve a plot of forest because of the services that forest provides to other organizations. Not only do forests sequester carbon, but they provide a broad set of ecosystem services which we as humans value, including flood defense. So because they'll absorb a ton of water before it even reaches a river, it significantly helps manage kind of runoff into the river and provides good flood defenses, and also helps with water filtration. So they provide a ton of services which you can compensate individuals for helping to preserve and restore those plots of land and so forth. That's quite a small niche market, however, it is growing. And then another asset market is water credits. So this is around kind of compensating and rewarding individuals for reducing pollution into rivers and ensuring kind of reduced runoff and high water quality. These are just naming a few, but there's several out there, but these are kind of the core ones. Now, the problem basically face against all these markets is that the current infrastructure behind them is stopping them from reaching their potential and scaling. And there's three key challenges which are being faced right now. One, which is actually tracking asset ownership and provenance. Right now, there's massive issues around tracking who owns what and where it came from. I mean, if you look at the carbon markets, what's used are things called registries, which are basically like a public database which record kind of details around an underlying project, so a reforestation project, which includes kind of the data behind that and any documentation kind of proving any carbon's been sequestered and been verified by a third party. But also it stores information around who owns any carbon credits, when were they created, and also when were they retired. Now, the problem is this technology hasn't really changed for the last 20 years. And as a result, they've got several issues, particularly around them being heavily manual intensive, in that if you transact any of these assets, in the case of carbon, for example, you have to manually go into these registries and then update who the new owner is. That causes two potential issues. One, it increases the risk for human error. And two, it opens opportunities for manipulation. In the carbon market alone, there's been several instances of double counting where the same carbon credits have been sold more than once, which obviously has a massive impact in terms of the credibility of this market. Now, because there's this lack of transparency, there's also a massive issue around how do you actually transact these assets. And this lack of transparency has meant that third-party intermediaries are heavily relied on because there's just a lack of trust between buyers and sellers. And most of these sellers are the ones who are actually creating these projects, creating the assets, the project developer. Now, right now, what happens is you will rely on a broker or a reseller. In the case of a broker, they will kind of facilitate the transaction between the two parties, kind of acting as an escrow account, but taking a nice commission of doing so, which again means less money is going towards the guys doing all the hard work, which is the project developers. Or in the case of a reseller, what they'll do is they'll buy those carbon credits off the project developer at a price, say $3 per carbon credit, and then they'll resell them to a multinational organization for a significant markup, say $5 to $10 per carbon credit. But the problem is these credits are being advertised to buyers based on the project, and as a result, the joke is the buyer is interested because of the project, but none of the money actually really gets to the actual project developer. It just goes to line the pockets of that intermediary, which obviously is not what we want. Now, the third issue is actually around climate finance. So there's a massive gap right now in climate finance for individual project developers and also communities. There's a ton of new initiatives coming out which are focused predominantly on large-scale programs and project developers. But it means that the small guys in the market and the communities, so indigenous people, for example, aren't getting the funding they need to develop the projects, which is raising barriers to entry and stopping a key stakeholder group from participating. And often, a lot of studies have shown that the small players in the market and the communities actually develop the most sustainable projects because they have a vested interest in their longevity and their success, rather than a private organization that's just coming in, planting some trees in the ground, then buggering off 10 years later. So there's a massive need to tackle this challenge. So on to BEF and how we're trying to tackle these challenges. So as the title suggests, we're building the solutions needed to help scale these markets. So what we've launched already back in October is a blockchain-based registry designed to create a new infrastructure for registries and really update registries to how they should be, providing unparalleled levels of transparency on asset ownership, provenance, and project data. Now, we launched this back in October, and have been making a ton of iterative enhancements to this, and are really confident this is the best in the market right now. Now, in terms of the different customers for this, it includes project developers, but also countries. If right now, if you want to participate in national carbon trading, your country needs a national registry, and this can be used for that. So that's one of the target groups we're talking to. Now, building on top of this, we are launching later this summer a peer-to-peer marketplace, fully integrated with the registry. And what this will enable you to do as a project developer and as a buyer is to transact peer-to-peer with one another without the need for any intermediary or escrow accounts. Now, this is going to have a few benefits. One, it's going to help project developers raise awareness and market their projects and their carbon credits and other nature-based assets. But also, it means that if you're a buyer, you know all the money you're spending on a carbon credit is going directly to the project developer and not to kind of that intermediate or third party. Now, because we have that foundational layer on the blockchain and the registry piece, it means we can provide unparalleled transparency as to where the credits came from, but also all transaction history around a credit. So using our Block Explorer, which is already live, you will be able to track the entire history of a credit from its initial creation through to its final kind of retirement. So the burning of tokens, for example. And we're already getting quite a lot of interest for this, and we're going to be piloting it, as I said, in the summer. Now, we're also building a solution to address the massive gap in climate finance, which again, we're going to be launching in later this year, hopefully. And this is a new financial instrument called microgreen bonds. And microgreen bonds give individuals and organizations an opportunity to directly fund nature-based asset projects. Now, it's similar in some way to crowdfunding, but unlike crowdfunding, there's a few additional benefits. One, they're completely transparent, so you can see who owns what, and also how many's in supply and so forth. Secondly, they're focusing on projects that need to raise between 50,000 and $2 million US, versus green bonds, which already exist, which are $10 million plus. So we're focusing predominantly on those small project developers and communities. On top of this, we're going to be able to use the DEX, which are being developed by Nexus, to make these fully tradable on our secondary market on our platform. So they're going to be liquid, and as a result, that's going to be quite attractive to a lot of investors. And we're already getting a ton of interest in this from both project developers and investors and organizations. And in terms of where this is at the moment, we've already done a lot of the building for it already. We're now working with one of the top law firms in the world to actually make sure that everything is compliant from a regulatory standpoint and also from a legal perspective. So when we launch this, we're doing everything by the book, and we're maximizing the opportunity for it to be a success. Now, we've got COP26 later this year in Glasgow, and that's basically a forum whereby all the major players in the space, every major politician and also organization who's focusing on climate change, will be attending. Fingers crossed it still goes ahead. And this, what we're doing is we're building all this stuff and launching it. That's our goal before this, so we can actually demonstrate this at COP26 and showcase to the world this technology, how it can be applied, and how it can actually fundamentally change these markets and help them scale and reach their potential. So that's our focus right now, really building these and launching these and piloting them and proving their benefit and their value, so that we can really broadcast this to the globe, to major people in the space. Now, we're going to be starting to actually roll out a ton of PR and comms now that we've built the vast majority of these services and solutions, and are happy now from a kind of build perspective as to their maturity. we're starting to now develop and going to be launching some big campaigns in the next couple of months. So if you want to follow us and see the progress we're making, follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn, or just keep visiting our website, and you're going to start seeing a lot more information around these two new services and how they're being applied. On top of this as well, we're also getting a lot of interest around how this technology can be applied to other challenges as well, whether it be to the renewable energy markets, but also to other applications around, for example, compensating farmers and so forth. So the really great thing about this is we've focused on for our initial focus on nature-based asset markets, but there's massive opportunities to apply this to so many different industries, and we're already getting people reach out to see if we can apply it to their issues as well. And just to add on top of my comments around the marketplace, we're already having people reach out to us who are interested because they see having extra transparency of their credits is actually a market advantage to them. It's a competitive advantage. And so they're really interested to participate in the pilot because it'll help raise awareness of their credits, but also having that additional transparency will mean that they can get a better price for their credits because they provide that verification, that proof that no one else can provide without using blockchain and without using our services in particular. So that's BEF and kind of what we're building. I wanted to touch upon how we've implemented Nexus tech as well. So just to give clarity, some people might be wondering, is this on the public chain? Is this kind of a private chain? Now, what we've done is we're running a private chain using Nexus tech. And the main reason we're doing that is that we need to have control over the creation of microgreen bonds, but also of environmental assets. It's not like anyone can just come. We basically can't let anyone just come along and create a carbon credit. There needs to be a clear process, and there needs to be clear documentation behind that. So we need to have some sort of permission system to do so. So we're currently running our own private chain and are in the process of working with other organizations to broaden the number of nodes on the network and help make it more decentralized to kind of reduce that single point of failure and get that extra resilience. And how we're seeing this potentially pan out is also getting other organizations in our industry implementing our tech as well, which is going to just build out the number of external nodes from BEF and again provide that extra security and resilience of our network. Now, what we're going to be transitioning to once it's ready is a hybrid chain where we're going to be integrating with the public chain of Nexus as well. And this is going to be a really great feature for us because not only will it help us manage nodes on our network, but also it provides greater security and immutability of our chain by broadcasting hashes of our chain onto the public chain. And that's what we're really looking forward to once that's all released and so forth. So moving on to why we chose Nexus and the benefits we're experiencing. So using Nexus gives us a massive competitive advantage in our space. I'll cover kind of the three different kind of values it provides. But for us, we've been able to build something in 6 months with greater functionality, more advanced technology, and greater scalability than people who have been in the space for 3 years or 3+ years and have a significantly bigger team than us. Now, there's a ton of other kind of aspects of it I'll cover through in a second, but just to kind of put it into context as well, we know of another organization that are using blockchain in the carbon markets, and there's quite a few, but this one in particular is a good example. And what they're doing is they are recording. So they're doing, they're selling carbon, basically a reseller. They're selling carbon credits to end buyers, and then they're retiring them on their behalf. So offsetting, burning the carbon credits. Then what they're doing from a blockchain perspective is storing metadata around that retirement on the Ethereum chain. Now, what they're doing is going to take them around a couple of months to do, and they're going to have to hire dedicated Solidarity coders, and it's going to cost them quite a lot of money to kind of pay the salaries of those people. The funny thing is, if we wanted to do the same thing on Nexus, we could do that in a few hours, literally. It's that simple. And that's the thing that I whenever you see competitors, and there's more competitors every single day, but knowing that we're using the Nexus tech, we know we have a massive competitive advantage over everyone else, because not only is our tech going to be more scalable and its performance is better, it's easier to use. From a regulatory standpoint, it is kind of significantly easier, and also kind of the team and the APIs available to us mean that we can build and develop stuff in an iterative way far quicker than anyone else in the market. So we are in our space, we think, probably the most agile organization, because we can build and test stuff so quickly because we're using Nexus's infrastructure and tech. So building on top of this, kind of, there's three key things that we're saying as real value to us. First is SigChain. So I'm sure everyone knows kind of the value of SigChain. I'm sure it's been covered in this conference. But for us, SigChains has been absolutely essential because they provide a few things. First, it significantly improves usability for us. We don't want our users to know they're using blockchain. They shouldn't need to know they're using blockchain. It should be super easy to use our platform. If we're going to be successful in countries such as in South America, in Asia, internationally, where potentially in some regions technical competence may not be as high as kind of in the UK or elsewhere, it needs to be really easy to use our tech. And if you're having to rely on individuals managing their private keys, that's going to be a massive barrier to entry, which just isn't acceptable for us. And what a lot of people are doing in the space is managing the private keys on behalf of users to make it easier. But this does a few things. One, it exposes a massive vulnerability in their system. I'm sure we've all experienced it with kind of exchanges, in that if you don't own your private key, you don't own the assets. And it means if a hacker exploits your network, they can basically disrupt your entire platform, which again has a massive reputational impact. Now, because we're using SigChains, it means this is decentralized. So we're not responsible for managing keys, and it gives users complete control and custody of their assets. But the other aspect, which is really interesting, is the regulatory benefits. In the UK, which is kind of regulated from a financial perspective by the FCA, but this is going to apply to so many different industries, is that the regulators coming really hot on managing crypto assets and managing user private keys. And if you are managing user private keys, there are a lot of regulatory hurdles you need to go through. If you're using SigChains, you don't have any of those hurdles because it's decentralized. You're not managing it. You don't have control of them. It's managed by the users in a way where they don't have to manage any of their private keys as well. So it's a win-win from a usability perspective. But from a regulatory standpoint, it's really attractive because we don't have to do any of that. And it means that we've avoided some massive regulatory hurdles from the perspective of the UK because we don't have that task to do. The other aspect, kind of, which is one of the selling points of Nexus, is the performance and scalability. Our private chain, which I know is different from the public network, but we can handle over 1,000 transactions per second, which means that we can pretty much handle any transaction volume that we're expecting on the platform. Even if the trading of microgreen bonds goes through the roof and it becomes a massive success, we know we're going to be able to handle any volume that we experience, and we're going to be able to do so with massive performance benefits and with plenty in the tank, really. Now, this is before we even started touching on the work that Colin's doing, which is around multi-threading and sharding. So it's only going to get better from here on up from a performance and scalability perspective. And the third thing, I think, which has been key to us, is the APIs and the team. So touching on the APIs first, this is obviously my opinion, but the APIs provided already by the Nexus team. And huge credits to Paul for doing a lot of this work, and I know others are involved, but you can pretty much build 95% of any use case out there using this set of APIs. And because they're so well documented and they're so broad, you can build and test stuff at rapid pace. And that's something that we've really found exciting, and we've really enjoyed from our experience using Nexus, is the speed to trial stuff and iterate it. And then moving on to the team perspective, we've worked obviously closely with Colin and Paul, and not only have they been super responsive to our needs, but also they want to hear feedback. They want to hear feedback, which is just music to our ears. So for the APIs perspective, they're helping to improve those APIs based on our experiences, but also if we identify opportunities that other use cases might have, they're willing to develop new APIs to support that. So they've been so responsive and great for us to provide the functionality we want to deliver. And as I said, there's such a rich set of APIs. You can really build anything you could possibly want with it already. So yeah, we've found all these different features absolutely instrumental for us. As I said, as a result of all these combined, we feel like we have a real competitive advantage. And there's no doubt that we feel so lucky to be one of the first people to develop with Nexus, to have been able to have the time with Paul and Colin, because this tech is so much more advanced than anything else on the market that it's only a matter of time before other people cotton onto this and start using this tech. And as a result, it's going to be harder and harder to get a hold of Colin, get a hold of Paul, and work with these guys. So we feel really lucky to be kind of one of the early adopters and be able to kind of experience working directly with these guys and helping Nexus kind of develop their API set even further. So that's everything I wanted to run through today. Again, really appreciate the opportunity to talk today. It's been a great experience. And if you wanna follow our progress, again, follow us on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And yeah, looking forward to building some great advancements in this space with Nexus. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mike. That was very, very informative. Are you able to take one question from the community?
Yeah.
We have one question from Casper. He would like to know, are you collaborating with the EU government? And he mentioned the Green Deal investment, which has a focus on blockchain implementation for sustainable energy, mobility, and circular economies.
Yep. So we've had conversations with the EU, so UNEP in particular, and we aren't participating in that particular scheme, but we've got a lot of interest. But it's more the point they want to see it demonstrated in practice, and once they've seen it work, then they've said that they would kind of get on board to help grow that. But our main focus right now is getting it built and piloted. We are also talking to other organizations around, we're in early talks with kind of some big NGOs, kind of internationally based, around actually developing a new market mechanism, one that goes far beyond carbon and is almost like a blend between payment for ecosystem services and carbon into a tradable asset, which represents an entire valuation of an ecosystem rather than just of a particular species or just the carbon component, because we think that's really needed to not only drive policy decisions, so achieve long-lasting results, but also provide an asset which is truly reflective of a natural habitat rather than just looking at the carbon component. So that's one of the projects we're working on. We're also talking to some governments in South America around potential other applications of our tech, but very early days. But we've got a lot of interest in a lot of different things. It's just we've been focused very heavily right now on building the tech and making sure that's in a good place. And now that we feel comfortable about that, our focus now is to start really raising awareness and doing some PR and comms. So in the next couple of months, you should see a massive uptick in kind of us talking about what we're building, advertising it, and getting others on board and doing podcasts and so forth to really make BEF better known in the space.
Fantastic. So you're focusing on biodiversity and regeneration over carbon capture and sustainability.
So we're doing it in addition. So the carbon markets are growing massively, and there's a need to use this tech to support those markets. But we're also conscious that other mechanisms are needed as well. So that's why we're exploring that with other organizations.
Perfect. So thank you ever so much for your presentation.
No worries.
And all the lovely things that you've said about Nexus and our developers. Thank you so much.
Cheers, guys.